Last Christmas, my daughter told me I was ruining the holiday spirit with my grief. This year, I donated the family lake house, the one they secretly planned to sell behind my back. My name is Margaret Holloway. I'm 68 years old, recently widowed, and until last year, I thought I had a close-knit family. Daniel and I were married for over 4 decades. We built a life in a modest colonial-style home in Connecticut and raised 2 children, Elise, now a senior executive in New York City, and Ryan, an attorney living in Boston. From the outside, we looked like a perfectly successful family. But when Daniel passed away last fall, the silence that followed revealed just how thin that illusion truly was. This December, the Christmas decorations felt like strangers in my own home. I wound the garland around the staircase banister just as Daniel and I had done for years. The pine needles pricked my fingers, but I kept wrapping, trying to recreate the rhythm of our old traditions. The angel on top of the tree tilted slightly to one side, her porcelain face as serene and detached as ever. Daniel would have climbed the ladder and fixed it for me. He always steadied the base and said, "Careful, Maggie, one slip and I'm the one decorating the emergency room." He had a way of making the mundane feel magical. Now the house echoed with a kind of quiet I hadn't known before. It wasn't just the absence of Daniel, it was the absence of being needed. The phone rang, breaking the stillness. Ryan's name lit up the screen. I picked up, forcing a smile into my voice. "Hi, Mom, just checking in," he said, his tone overly cheerful, like a nurse talking to a patient. "I was just decorating the tree," I told him, thinking maybe we'd do Christmas at the lake house this year, like always. He paused. I heard a door close on his end. "Let's talk about that later, okay? How are you holding up?" "I'm managing," I said, though the framed photo of the 4 of us at the lake, taken just 2 summers ago, sat crooked on the mantel. "Good. Hey, I've got a meeting starting. I'll call you this weekend," but he didn't. Elise's replies to my texts were even shorter. "In a meeting, love you," and then nothing for days. When I called her, she answered in a whisper, clearly annoyed. "I really can't talk right now, Mom." "I won't keep you. Just wanted to check on Christmas plans. The lake." "Hold on." I heard muffled sounds, and then her voice, not meant for me. "She's still not handling it well." I tightened my grip on the phone. When she came back, her voice was a sugary version of itself. "Sorry, let's talk later." I hung up and wandered into Daniel's study. His leather chair still held the faint scent of his cologne. I trailed my fingers across the spines of his books, then pulled out a photo album, our wedding, Elise's birth, Ryan's graduation, summers at the lake house, my whole life printed and bound, page after page of making sure everyone else had what they needed. And suddenly, it hit me. Somewhere between being the one who kept it all together and the one who grieved in silence, I had become invisible, even to the people who once called me home. And that's when the unraveling began. If you've ever felt overlooked by the very people you once carried on your back, you're not alone. Subscribe to Real Her Stories for more voices like mine, and feel free to like, share, and leave a comment. Your story matters too. 2 weeks before Christmas, I arrived at Ryan's home in Boston with my sweet potato casserole, still warm from the oven, covered in the same red gingham towel Daniel used to fold so carefully around the dish. It was his favorite. He always asked for seconds. I thought, maybe, just maybe, a little piece of our tradition might warm the room. Diana, my daughter-in-law, greeted me at the door with a tight-lipped smile and perfectly ironed slacks. She took the casserole and gave it a cursory glance. "Oh, Margaret, you didn't need to bring anything," she said, already turning toward the kitchen. "The caterer is handling the whole menu this year." "I just thought the kids might like." "They're all on special diets now, but it's sweet of you to try." She set the dish on the far end of the counter, away from the other food, like it might offend someone if left too close to the kale chips and quinoa stuffing. The grandchildren were buried in their phones, thumbs scrolling and tapping as I walked into the living room. A couple of them looked up when Ryan announced, "Grandma's here," the way one might announce a weather change. I offered hugs that were returned like obligations. We sat through dinner like polite strangers. When I mentioned the writing class I'd joined at the community center, Elise checked her watch, and Ryan nodded like he hadn't heard a word. After dessert, I excused myself and wandered down the hall, not because I needed the restroom, but because I needed to breathe. That's when I heard them. Elise's voice came first. "We cannot do Christmas at the lake house again. She turns it into a memorial. She's stuck in grief mode." "She's spiraling," Ryan agreed. We've got to take control of the situation before she turns the holidays into a funeral." The words landed like ice in my chest. I moved closer, pressing against the hallway wall. "Have you talked to the attorney?" Elise asked. "Yeah, Dad put the lake house in her name years ago. Some kind of anniversary thing." "What? I thought it was going to be ours eventually." "It still will be," Ryan said, "but we need to get her to sign it over while she's still coherent." Elise laughed. "Did you see her looking for her glasses? They were on her head." They had contacted the family lawyer, the real estate office, even Martin, our longtime caretaker, and all behind my back. They weren't just dismissing me, they were erasing me. I slipped back into the bathroom and locked the door, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed smaller than I remembered, dimmed. When did my children stop seeing me as a person? Later that night, Ryan offered to drive me to my hotel. In the car, he mentioned casually, "Elise and I were thinking about trying something new this year. Maybe Christmas in Aspen?" "But we've always gone to the lake house," I said, keeping my voice even. "Traditions change, Mom. Dad's gone now. It's time to make new memories." He smiled, condescending, and patted my hand like I was the child. I turned to the window. I wasn't crying, but something was burning beneath the grief, something I hadn't felt in a long time: anger. When I got home, I sat alone in Daniel's study and opened the envelope I'd been too afraid to face since the funeral. His handwriting was shakier than I remembered, but the message was clear. "Maggie, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. The lake house is in your name now, my gift to you. I've also had growing concerns about James, Elise's husband. I haven't confronted him yet, but something feels off in the family accounts. You'll find my notes behind the Dickens collection in my study." I sat there frozen, not from shock, but recognition. Somewhere deep inside, I already knew something was wrong. The next morning, I pulled out the leather-bound Dickens volumes and found the small safe Daniel had hidden behind them. I entered our wedding date, his clever choice for the combination, and the door clicked open. Inside, a journal and a folder thick with records, bank statements, investment summaries, handwritten observations Daniel had kept during his final years. He had seen what was happening. He just didn't live long enough to act, but I did. With trembling fingers and a steadier heart than I'd had in months, I began making calls to a lawyer I trusted, to the land trust Daniel had once mentioned, and to Margaret Harlan, my old friend from the community board. I wasn't ready to confront my children, not yet, but I wasn't invisible anymore. Not to myself, not to Daniel, and very soon, not to them. The lake house had always smelled like pine needles and old books, but that day, it carried something else: resolve. I hadn't been back since Daniel's memorial service, and stepping through the door alone, I felt his presence so clearly it made me stop mid-step. Not in a ghostly way, but like a steady hand on my back. I walked straight into his study. I'd already found the safe and the documents, but I needed to return to that space again before what I was about to do. I opened the safe with our wedding date, August 16th, 1965, and gently pulled out Daniel's journal. I hadn't read every page, just enough to know what he'd uncovered. His handwriting, though frail near the end, still carried the same weight. "Confirmed today, James has diverted $42,000 from Andrew's education fund. Claimed it was market fluctuation. It wasn't. We'll gather more proof before telling Margaret. She deserves truth, not speculation." Then this entry just days before Daniel's heart gave out. "It breaks my heart to know our children may not be as honest as we hoped. But if I go first, I want Margaret to have what she's earned. She's put everyone first. It's time she chooses herself." I folded the journal closed and sat with it in my lap. He'd trusted me with this, trusted me to act when he no longer could. I did what I had to do. I contacted the Vermont Land Preservation Trust and submitted a letter of intent to donate the lake house. The trust had been hoping to preserve that stretch of shoreline for years. With Daniel's documentation and my legal standing as sole owner, the process moved quickly. In exchange, I requested that a plaque be placed by the dock. "In memory of Daniel Holloway, for the stillness, for the summers, for the stories." Half the appraised value would be donated to a national grief foundation in his name. The other half remained in my control, untouched by the people who had assumed I wouldn't notice what they were doing. I waited until Christmas Day at Elise's Aspen condo. The house was all silver garland and soft jazz, curated joy. Elise offered me a flute of champagne, and Ryan kissed my cheek as if we hadn't drifted into two different solar systems. Their warmth was too polished, too cautious. I played my part. I smiled. I nodded. I listened to James talk about emerging real estate markets with the same bravado he'd always used when pitching investments at the table. After dessert, an artfully plated creme brulee, I cleared my throat. "I brought something a little different this year," I said, reaching into my bag. "One for each of you." I passed out the envelopes I'd addressed by hand. Elise took hers delicately, like it might stain her fingers. Ryan looked confused. Diana's eyes narrowed slightly. They opened them together. I watched their faces shift. "What is this?" Ryan asked, voice low. "Exactly what it says," I answered. "The lake house has been donated to the Vermont Land Preservation Trust. The property is now protected. No development. Ever." Elise's face flushed. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious." "You had no right." "I had every right," I cut in, my voice still soft but unshakable. "Daniel put the lake house in my name. 15 years ago. You might have known that if you had asked instead of plotting behind my back." James stood, puffing himself up. "I think this is an emotional reaction. It's understandable given your grief, but surely..." I reached into my bag again and placed the folder on the table. "This is not an emotional reaction. This is a documented response." Inside, copies of Daniel's journal entries, bank statements, emails between Elise and the development firm, and Daniel's letter to me. The silence in the room was thunderous. Elise looked at James. His expression had dropped the salesman charm. Diana stared at the financial documents in front of her, then at her husband. Ryan cleared his throat. "We should talk about this calmly." I turned to him. Years of being spoken over now settled into a calm, clear boundary. "This isn't revenge," I said. "This is the first time I've told the truth without fear of being called dramatic, or fragile, or in the way." Elise stood abruptly, gathering her things. "We'll be in touch," she said stiffly. James followed, silent. Ryan remained seated, speechless. Diana stayed behind as they left. Her eyes met mine. She said nothing, but there was something new there. Respect. For the first time in a long while, I'd done what no one expected from the grieving, quiet widow. I stood up, for myself, for Daniel, for what was right. In the weeks that followed, I did something simple but symbolic. I changed my phone number. Not out of spite, but to draw a boundary that had been missing for too long. I gave the new number only to the people who had earned a place in my new life. Ruth, my attorney. Thomas, who had quietly become a steady presence. And Margaret Harlan, my dear friend who never asked me to explain my grief. Elise and Ryan tried to push back. Ryan sent a letter through his law firm questioning the validity of my donation to the Preservation Trust. Ruth replied with documentation, dates, appraisals, and Daniel's explicit wishes. Elise, I later learned, separated from James shortly after Christmas. Whether it was guilt, disillusionment, or just consequence catching up, I may never know. But it wasn't my burden anymore. Then one afternoon, my granddaughter Lily called. She'd tracked down my new number through our former caretaker's wife. Her voice was small, trembling with something that sounded like shame. "Grandma, I'm sorry," she said, "for not standing up, for using the lake house without asking. I should have come to you directly." That call meant more to me than all the polished apologies in the world. We agreed to meet for cocoa and conversation, just the two of us. No agendas, no pretending. I enrolled in that writing class I'd mentioned back at Ryan's dinner table, the one no one cared to ask about. I joined a local community board again. I started reading poetry in the mornings and stopped asking for permission to take up space. And Thomas, well, we never labeled anything. We just walked together, talked about books, music, the texture of memory. In his presence, I felt seen, not as a widow or a burden, but as a person still growing. One brisk March afternoon, I returned to the lake house, now officially Parkland. Lily joined me, her gloved hand nestled in mine. Thomas walked a few paces ahead, giving us space. A small bronze plaque stood beside the dock, the sun catching the engraving just right. In memory of Daniel Holloway, a place for reflection, preserved with love. I stood there for a long while. "For decades," I said quietly, "I kept peace by staying silent. But true harmony comes from truth, even when it hurts. And I finally understood the difference. I thought losing Daniel would be the hardest part of my life. But in truth, The hardest part was realizing how long I'd abandoned myself. I'm not telling you this for pity. I'm sharing it so that someone out there knows. It's never too late to reclaim your voice, your life, or your worth. Thank you for listening. If this touched something in you, I hope you'll share it, and maybe share a piece of your own story too. We're listening.